December the 30th last year, when police knocked on his door and arrested him.
It was a complete surprise to me. I was arrested, as I think has been quite widely reported. I was taken for 3 days of interview to the police station before I was finally released on police bail. Although I wasn't actually released from police bail and therefore technically ceased to be a suspect for about 9 weeks after my release from custody.
And therefore this cloud over you, a question, a suspicion, was lifted.
That's right, and certainly those 9 weeks or so from the beginning of January to the beginning of March were a particularly stressful period for me.
Tell us what happened when you actually were released from police custody, because during those 3 days you were inside, the press coverage had, to say the least, been fairly lurid.
Indeed it had, although it was considerably after I was released that I realised that, because during the time that I was in custody, the solicitor who was representing me had very, very wisely decided that it was certainly not a good idea that I should be made aware of that, and friends after my release protected me from a great deal of it.
And we should explain that during those days, that, for example, The Sun, and I've got some images from the papers at the time, The Sun had the headline on its front page, "The Strange Mr. Jefferies." The Daily Mirror had, "Joe suspect is peeping Tom." I mean, the papers, here's the Daily Star, "Joe landlord a creep who freaked out schoolgirls." The papers had a field day pretty much with your reputation, didn't they?
And it was precisely for that reason that I felt I had no other recourse than to take the legal action which has recently been concluded against 8 of the tabloid papers.
Now, just before we get on to that, you say that it was some time before you realised. But when did you first have a hint? Because I know you were staying with friends at the time, I understand, and you were going to go out, I think, to go to Bristol to get some clothes and some washing things, and your friend said...
Indeed, it was at that point that the solicitor emphasised in no uncertain terms that this would be an extremely bad idea, and that if necessary he would come down from London to dissuade me in person. So I suppose it was at that point that I realised just how much of a household name for all the wrong reasons I had become.
You've said, you've expressed dismay at the government's plans to change the laws at the moment, the laws on legal aid as they stand.
Quite.
Do you really think that you couldn't have brought your case if the laws were not as they currently are, and they were as the government plans to change them?
I think there is absolutely no question that I wouldn't have been able to take the action that I did, because at the moment one is able to take out a conditional fee agreement, and that means that...
That's a no-win, no-fee.
That's right, and that means that the lawyer's success fees, which are a percentage of the total legal costs of taking the action, will be paid by the other side, and one won't be responsible for those. Now, because these cases can be dragged out over a considerable period of time, particularly if they go to court, then legal fees are astronomical, and one couldn't begin to potentially expose oneself for the risk of having to pay tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds in advance.
But a case such as yours, was it not so exceptional? Indeed, you say yourself that it was your lawyer who pointed out that you should be suing the newspapers. Any lawyer's going to take it on.
Indeed, my case was exceptional, and I'm not necessarily talking just about cases such as my own. I think what people are much more concerned about are people, for example, who have to take actions against intrusion into privacy, where damages are very much less even than those awarded for libel, and particularly in the case of defendants in libel cases, who, of course, if they succeed in defending themselves, get no damages at all.
And you're saying that somebody's access to justice undoubtedly would be denied in those cases?
Undoubtedly. I think there is no question of that whatsoever.
You, as we say, sued 8 papers. You won an apology and damages, but you're also in the process of suing the police, and that is still outstanding. Your anger seems in large part to come from the way that you were treated by the police. Is that right?
I think I was very, very disturbed, both by the way I was treated by the police and by the way I was treated by the press.
The reason I mention this about the police is purely because it was some time, in a sense, before you were fully aware of what the media had done. But you were angry at the police, or at least I should say, angry at the business, the way in which arrest works, what happens to you. And you've written about feeling as though you were so violated, it felt like rape. Can you explain what you meant by that?
When I was talking about that, I was referring to the extraordinary tissue of fabrications and misrepresentations that appeared in the press. That didn't refer to my treatment at the hands of the police. I was merely drawing an analogy and saying that when one is arrested, one is in a particularly defenceless position. And it is then made doubly worse if onto that defenceless person is imposed the entirely defamatory and the entirely unreal personality that was imposed upon me.
Christopher Jefferies, thank you very much for talking to us.